spotlight flickers on, casting a single beam of pale gold across the stage. A trembling 14-year-old girl stands in its path, frozen at the center. Her name is Grace Whitman, though no one in the audience knows it yet. She wears a faded floral dress, the hem slightly frayed, the collar slightly uneven, a hand-stitched piece her mother patched together from scraps of old blouses. Among the bright, glittering outfits of sequins, rhinestones, and store-bought glamour, Grace looks like a forgotten memory. Her shoes are scuffed 2 sizes too big, and her long brown hair is tied back with a fraying ribbon. A hush falls for half a second. Then, it begins. A ripple of laughter breaks from somewhere in the second row. Then another. A few whispers echo. One girl in a bright pink dance costume leans to her friend and sneers, "Who let Grandma's couch on stage?" The crowd chuckles. A boy lets out a mocking whistle. Someone claps sarcastically. Grace clutches the microphone with both hands. Her knuckles turn white. Her breath is shallow. Her eyes dart toward the auditorium doors. Maybe just run. Her knees are shaking. Her voice trembles. For a moment, it looks like she won't even try. But then she closes her eyes, and slowly, as if reaching for something deep inside her, something older, quieter, truer, she takes a long, deliberate breath. A hush spreads again, unsure, curious. Then Grace sings, not loud, not polished, but real. Her voice, soft, aching, haunting, floats out like smoke curling from an old chimney in winter. Notes hang in the air like memories returning. The auditorium, just moments ago filled with ridicule, is suddenly still. The laughter dies, the smirks fade. A teacher leans forward. A student lowers their phone. Even the girl in pink sits still, because something in that fragile voice is breaking through, and no one expected it. Grace Whitman wasn't the kind of girl people noticed in the hallways. She walked with her books clutched tightly to her chest, eyes down, hair often hiding her face. In a small Texas town where people talked more about football than feelings, Grace was the quiet wind in the background. Always present, rarely heard. She lived on the edge of town, in a weather-worn trailer tucked behind rows of rusted mailboxes, raised by her grandmother, Mabel Whitman. After losing her mother at the age of 7, Grace learned early how to survive without asking for much. Mabel, once a lounge singer in the 70s, now spent her days stitching quilts and her nights humming half-forgotten lullabies to the stars. Grace worked after school at a tiny diner off Highway 12, clearing plates, refilling sweet tea, and singing softly under her breath as she wiped down the counters. The regulars sometimes paused their conversations just to hear her. At home, music was her sanctuary. Her bedroom, barely big enough to fit a twin bed and a desk, was filled with scraps of lyrics scribbled on napkins, the margins of textbooks, and the backs of diner receipts. Her grandmother once said, "Your voice, Gracie. It's like honey poured over old heartbreak." No one at school knew about that voice. So when Grace signed up for the annual talent show, the entire 8th grade homeroom stared at her as if she'd just announced she was moving to Mars. Even the teacher blinked in surprise. "Grace," one girl asked, blinking, "you're performing?" Grace only nodded, quietly. She had no glitter, no vocal coach, and no fancy background track. What she did have was a song passed down from her mother, and a dress stitched with trembling hands and memories, a patchwork of faded blues, sunflowers, and tiny roses. Her grandmother had adjusted the seams and whispered, "Your mama wore this when she sang to you. It's your turn now, baby." The night of the show, Grace packed only one thing in her bag, a folded lyric sheet and a small photo of her mom, smiling beside a microphone. She wasn't stepping onto the stage for applause. She was stepping onto it to be heard, just once. The night of the talent show arrived like a storm wrapped in neon lights. Willow Creek Middle School's auditorium buzzed with energy. Glittery costumes, rehearsed dance routines, and booming pop tracks echoed through the halls. The crowd, a sea of students, parents, and teachers, filled every seat with anticipation and chatter. Backstage, Grace stood alone, cradling her late mother's dress in her arms. She had braided her hair the way her mom once wore it and dabbed on a bit of lipstick her grandmother called sunset coral. Around her, other performers laughed and posed for selfies. Someone snapped a photo of her, standing quietly in the corner, wearing her faded patchwork dress. And moments later, laughter erupted from a group of girls. "She looks like she just time-traveled from a yard sale," one whispered. On someone's phone, Grace's picture was already posted online with the caption, "Vintage fail." A Kutch pattern chick, the words stung deeper than she expected. Her fingers clenched the hem of the dress. Maybe she should leave. Maybe they were right. Her heart pounded as the announcement came over the intercom. Next up, Grace Whitman, performing Unchained Melody. She almost couldn't move. But then, somewhere behind the rising anxiety, she heard her grandmother's voice, calm, certain. That dress carried your mama's dreams. Now it's your turn, Gracie girl. Let him hear what hope sounds like. And Grace knew. She wasn't wearing a costume. She was wearing a legacy. She stepped onto the stage, eyes blinking under the spotlight. The crowd's reaction was immediate. Laughter, murmurs, even a few gasps. From the audience, a boy whispered too loudly, she forgot Halloween was over. Grace stood still, the microphone cool in her trembling hands. She could feel the judgment, the pity, the rejection. But she didn't run, she closed her eyes. In that instant, the auditorium faded. She saw her mother dancing barefoot in the kitchen. She heard Mabel humming by the porch. And she remembered what this moment truly was: not a competition, not a popularity contest, a chance. Her lips parted and the first note rose, soft, aching, and unshakably real. And just like that, the laughter stopped. After the show, the silence didn't last. The next morning, Grace walked through the school halls with her books clutched tightly to her chest. Whispers trailed behind her like shadows. Did you see that dress up close? I think my grandma has that pattern on her curtains. She actually sang. I thought that was a joke act. Screens flashed with her photo, frozen mid-song, eyes closed, heart wide open, now turned into memes. Someone had edited her into a thrift store ad. Another post read, live from the antique shop stage, Grace the ghost of 1974. Grace pretended not to see, but inside her heart wilted. For the first time in years, she stopped humming while she worked at the diner. At home, even the radio went untouched. Her voice, the thing that once carried her through dishwater days and lonely nights, felt too heavy to lift. Mabel noticed, of course, the way Grace slipped quietly into her room after dinner. The way the spark had drained from her voice. You okay, Sugar Plum? Her grandmother asked gently one night. Grace just nodded. At school, the days blurred. Her footsteps grew quieter, her eyes stayed low, until one afternoon, as she was packing up from class, a gentle voice called from the back of the music room, Grace. It was Mrs. Collins, the school's part-time music teacher, a woman most kids ignored. I've been meaning to talk to you. Grace turned slowly. Mrs. Collins smiled, not with pity but with understanding. She held out a worn sheet of music, its edges curled like old leaves. You have something they don't even know how to hear yet. But I do. And I think if you'll let me, I can help you show them. Grace didn't answer right away. Her voice was still hiding, buried deep behind layers of embarrassment and hurt. But the way Mrs. Collins said it, like it wasn't just a compliment, but a promise, sparked something small. A beginning. The music room smelled faintly of old wood and chalk dust. Grace sat at the upright piano, her fingers clenched in her lap. Mrs. Collins stood nearby, patient, waiting, not for perfection, but for the courage to try again. Let's start from the second verse, she said gently. And this time, don't sing like you're afraid someone will hear you. Sing like your voice is the only thing they'll remember. It took a few tries, a few hesitant notes, but something was shifting in Grace. Slowly, her voice began to rise, not loud, but steady, like a candle learning to stay lit against the wind. Each evening, after the last bell rang and the hallways emptied, she stayed behind with Mrs. Collins. They worked on breathing, on pitch, on presence. It wasn't about being the best, it was about being honest. One night after practice, Grace walked into the trailer to find her grandmother sitting on the couch, a weathered shoebox on her lap. What's that? Grace asked, setting down her bag. Mabel opened it slowly, revealing an old cassette tape and a tiny portable player. Your mama used to sing too, she said softly. This was recorded when she was about your age. Thought you might want to hear it. The tape crackled, then came the soft, tremulous voice of a girl, Grace's mother, singing the very song Grace had been rehearsing that week. You are my sunshine. Grace froze. Her breath caught. Her own voice echoed in her memory from rehearsal, and suddenly it was as if the walls fell away. Her mother's voice, her own, and the distant memory of her grandmother humming while hanging laundry. 3 voices across time, across loss, one song, one legacy. And Grace felt it for the first time in weeks. She wasn't alone. Quiet montage begins. Grace standing alone under the flickering lights of the diner after hours, a broom in one hand, her voice drifting softly through the empty booths. Her reflection in the window isn't scared anymore, it's focused. In the church basement, she sings in front of cracked hymnals and rows of folding chairs. Mrs. Collins watches from the piano bench, nodding gently, pressing the pedal with care. Again, she says, and Grace starts over, her voice growing more confident with each repetition. At home, the sewing machine hums. Grace threads a needle by the kitchen window. The patchwork dress lies across the table. Her mother's old one, its seams tired, fabric sun-washed and delicate. Grace works stitch by stitch, restitching the shoulders, hemming the skirt. She doesn't try to modernize it or hide its history. She honors it. Flashbacks flicker. Grace as a child, curled on her mother's lap, being rocked to sleep while her mother hummed a lullaby. Her mother pinning that same dress on a laundry line, wind tugging it like a kite. Her grandmother brushing Grace's hair before school, whispering, "You come from music, baby. You just don't know how loud it sings in you yet." Each moment weaves into the present. The Shea girl who once stood frozen on stage is gone. In her place stands someone who knows exactly what this music means. Back in the school hallway, the sign-up sheet for the upcoming community music showcase hangs on the bulletin board. Students pass it by casually, some adding their names with a flourish. Grace walks up to the sheet, pen in hand. For a moment, she hesitates. Then she writes slowly and deliberately. Grace Ellen Whitman, a name filled with history, with longing, with hope, and as she walks away, her eyes are forward, clear, steady. This time, she isn't just singing. She's arriving. The evening air hums with anticipation as the town gathers inside the old Civic Auditorium for the annual Community Music Showcase. Strings of warm lights dangle from the ceiling, casting a golden hue across the wooden stage. Folding chairs line every row, and a quiet murmur of chatter fills the room. Teachers, parents, townsfolk, even a few local news crews have shown up. Backstage, Grace waits, breathing slowly. The same patchwork dress, now carefully restored, hugs her frame like armor. Her hair is pulled back in a simple braid, a ribbon her grandmother gave her tied at the end. Mrs. Collins adjusts the mic, squeezes Grace's shoulder, and whispers, "Let them see you." The MC steps forward. And now a performance by Grace Ellen Whitman. As she steps into the light, a hush falls. Some in the audience shift uncomfortably, remembering the girl once laughed off stage for wearing that same dress. But tonight, Grace walks differently. Head held high, eyes steady. She holds the mic gently, then silence. For a second, it feels like the world stops spinning. And she sings. It's a folk ballad, an old tune her mother used to sing, once forgotten, now reborn. Her voice is soft at first, delicate as a breath. But then it deepens, finding its center. Strong, aching, rich with emotion, not polished. Not pertily true. You could hear the creak of a chair if someone shifted, but no one does. One verse. Then the next, a girl in the back lowers her phone. No longer recording, just watching. A father in the third row closes his eyes, transported to some distant memory. A teacher wipes her cheek. Even the students who once whispered now sit upright, startled into stillness by the honesty in Grace's voice. As she reaches the final verse, her voice quivers, not from fear, but from feeling. The lyrics land like raindrops on a parched soul, and when she sings the last line, the note lingers, hovering like light on water. Then silence, for a moment. No one claps, they don't need to. The silence itself is reverence, then a single pair of hands begins to applaud. Then another. And another, within seconds. The entire auditorium rises. A standing ovation swells through the room, loud, unfiltered, genuine. Grace blinks back tears, bowing once, deeply, humbly. In the wings, her grandmother presses a hand to her heart, her eyes full. Mrs. Collins whispers, "They heard you, Grace." Every note. The showcase ends, and Grace steps off stage into a flood of hugs, tearful nods, and unexpected applause that follows her into the hallway. But when the final results are announced, she doesn't take first place. A polished jazz trio from a private academy claims the top spot, and yet Grace doesn't feel defeated. As people filter out of the auditorium, a representative from a well-known youth music conservatory approaches Mrs. Collins, then turns to Grace. "Would you consider auditioning for our fall program in Austin? We think your voice deserves a wider stage." Grace's eyes widen. She nods, overwhelmed, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Her grandmother, standing a few feet behind, clutches her coat and softly whispers, "Your mama would be so proud." The next morning at school, things feel different. There's no laughter in the halls when Grace walks by. Just quiet recognition. Some glance away, a few smile. One girl, the same one who once led the whispers and mocked her dress, passes by without a word. But later, at her locker, Grace finds a folded note taped to the door. It simply says, "You made me cry. I'm sorry. No name." Just a small heart drawn at the bottom. Grace stands there for a moment, reading it twice, her fingers brushing the edges. Then she smiles. Not out of vindication, but something deeper. She doesn't need an apology to feel whole. She has already reclaimed the parts of herself she thought she had to hide. That night, back at home, Grace sits on the trailer porch with her grandmother. The stars sprawl across the Texas sky. They share slices of peach pie in silence until Grace hums softly. The same tune from the showcase. Her grandmother joins in. It's not a performance now. Not a fight to be heard. Just music shared between hearts that have known loss and still chose to sing. The night air is cool as Grace and her grandmother walk home, their shadows stretching out under the soft glow of street lamps. The streets are quiet now, emptied after the community showcase, but Grace's heart is full, overflowing with something new. Not just pride, but peace. Her grandmother walks slowly beside her, one hand resting gently on Grace's shoulder. After a moment of silence, she says in her soft drawl, "You looked like your mama up there tonight." Grace glances sideways, her eyes shimmering in the dim light. "I felt like I finally sang for both of us." Her grandmother nods, eyes misty, lips pressed into a smile both proud and sad. "And she heard you." "I just know it." They keep walking. A breeze rustles the trees. A dog barks in the distance. Ordinary sounds of an ordinary town. But tonight, it all feels different. Like the world shifted, just slightly, to make room for a voice that had been ignored for too long. As they near their trailer, the camera slowly pans upward, capturing the soft twinkle of stars overhead. A quiet voiceover begins, perhaps Grace's voice in a future time, matured and reflective. "We laugh at what we don't understand. We mock what's unfamiliar, what's unpolished, what reminds us of things we try to forget. But sometimes, in a single note, someone sings the truth, and silence becomes respect." The porch light flicks on. The front door creaks open. Grace and her grandmother step inside. And just before the screen fades to black, we hear a final hum. Faint but unmistakable, the same melody Grace sang, now belonging to every listener who finally learned how to hear.